They laughed at her resume before she even sat down. When Leona walked into that interview room, wearing her best thrift store blazer and holding a folder with carefully printed copies of her CV, the receptionist barely looked up. One of the hiring managers actually snorted when she thanked him for the opportunity. They didn't even hide their amusement when she said her father worked in the same building. Not in finance, not in tech, not even in catering. He was the night janitor. Leona had always known she'd have to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. But that morning, the weight of being the janitor's daughter was heavier than ever. What the panel didn't know was that she'd spent the last 5 years quietly learning everything about the company. Its tech stack, its security flaws, even its outdated internal systems. Not because she had access, but because her father used to bring home the shredded documents from the recycling bins. She pieced them together like puzzles. Every memo, every printout, every spreadsheet. She knew things she probably shouldn't. But none of that mattered now, because all they saw was her cheap shoes, her no-name college degree, and her last name on the application form, Mendez. So, Miss Mendez, the woman in the gray suit said, glancing at the paper like it had something sticky on it. Why do you think you're the right fit for an elite analyst position here? Leona smiled, not because she was confident, but because she'd practiced this exact question over 100 times in her bedroom mirror. I believe I understand your systems better than most, she said. I've identified at least 3 inefficiencies in your logistics chain from public data alone. I'm willing to work for entry-level pay, and I'm not afraid of being underestimated. The woman raised an eyebrow. Public data? Like what, social media? No, Leona said. Your internal memos, many of which were improperly shredded, and your outdated filing policy that still uses PDF watermarks with trackable user IDs. The room went quiet. One of the men leaned forward. Are you saying you accessed confidential information? No, Leona said firmly. I reconstructed public trash. I made inferences. I didn't break any laws. There was a pause, then laughter. Not the friendly kind. The smug, condescending kind that punches a hole in your chest. Thank you, Miss Mendez, the woman said, standing. We've seen all we need. The interview lasted under 7 minutes. Leona left the building with her chin high, but her stomach in knots. Her father was waiting outside, still in uniform, sitting on an overturned mop bucket as he tied a new trash bag. He looked up when he saw her. How'd it go? She didn't want to lie, but she didn't want to make him feel worse either. He had pulled every favor just to get her a foot in the door. They weren't hiring, she said quietly. He nodded. Doesn't matter. You'll find the right place. He always said that. Always. But Leona wasn't so sure anymore. That night, she stayed up until 3 a.m., again. She reopened her files. She reread the 3 case studies she had written for her portfolio, none of which they'd even looked at. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford to waste energy on that. Then she noticed something odd. In one of the shredded printouts she had pieced together months ago, there was a footer with a username she hadn't seen before. It matched a different department. Finance, not logistics. And beside it, a reference to an account transfer ID that didn't follow the company's usual formatting. She cross-referenced it with a publicly available quarterly report. Something didn't add up. The numbers looked off, and not in a spreadsheet error way, in a someone is hiding something way. The more she dug, the more red flags popped up. The next day, while her father worked another 12-hour shift, Leona called in a favor from her community college professor, who now worked in data compliance, She didn't mention the company by name, just the structure of the problem. After 2 hours, the professor said quietly, "If that's real, it could be fraud. Big fraud." Leona didn't sleep that night either. By the end of the week, she had constructed a full report, 35 pages, with supporting evidence, source IDs, and inferred account trails. She didn't know who to give it to. The company had already dismissed her. She had no insider status, no credibility. But her gut told her this wasn't just about a rejection. It was about something far bigger, and someone needed to see it. So she printed 2 copies. One, she mailed to the anonymous tip line on the company's website, though she wasn't naive enough to think it would actually reach someone with integrity. The second, she slipped inside her father's lunchbox. She knew he cleaned the executive floor twice a week. She also knew which office belonged to the CEO. What she didn't expect was that her father would actually read the report himself. 3 days later, Leona came home to find him sitting silently at the kitchen table, holding the stapled document in his hands. "How long have you known about this?" he asked. "Just figured it out last week." He nodded slowly. "And you're sure it's real?" She paused. "I wouldn't have written it if I wasn't." He tapped the page. "There's only one person who'll do something about this. And if I get fired for leaving this on his desk, then so be it." She blinked. "You're serious?" "I've cleaned his trash for 10 years. Her father said. "It's time I left him something worth keeping." And the next night, he did just that. What Leona didn't know, what no one knew, was that the CEO hadn't been in that office for a week. The person who found the document wasn't who they expected, and everything spiraled from there. The folder sat untouched on the mahogany desk for nearly 36 hours. Security had found it during a routine night sweep. Unlabeled, no envelope, no note, just a report held together by a black binder clip. Standard procedure would have been to toss it or send it to admin. But one of the guards, a quiet man named Rowan who had worked nights for nearly a decade, gave it a second glance. He'd seen a lot in that office. He knew who left behind messes, who was forgetful, who stayed late, and who never did. And he knew this. This wasn't trash. So instead of tossing it in the shred bin, he handed it directly to Vanessa Kerr, the acting chief operations officer. Vanessa wasn't in the mood for distractions. She was already managing a dozen crises, most of them tied to an upcoming board meeting. But something about Rowan's expression made her pause. He rarely said anything, let alone something like, "I think you should read this. Carefully." She took it, skimmed the first few pages, and stopped. By the 5th page, she was no longer skimming. By page 11, she had locked her office door. By the final page, she was calling a private forensic accounting team she'd worked with once before during a merger audit. What Leona had uncovered wasn't just suspicious, it was damning. Subtle inconsistencies in the finance reports, shadow accounts traced through vague shell vendors, and payouts just under the reporting threshold. Worse? The patterns pointed to someone with high-level access. Leona had even flagged the usernames that appeared repeatedly across sensitive transactions. One of them belonged to someone in Vanessa's own department. That night, Vanessa didn't go home. The next morning, while employees buzzed about their usual Friday routines, Vanessa walked straight to the CEO's office, still empty, and made a single call. It was a direct line to a man named Joel Mercer, the founder and majority shareholder, now semi-retired, but still the final authority behind major company decisions. He rarely answered on the first ring. This time he picked up immediately. By noon, he was in the building. and by 3 p.m., a private investigative audit had already begun, completely under the radar. No one suspected anything yet. No one except one very worried junior analyst named Armand Soto, because it turned out one of the usernames Leona had flagged, rsoto.04, was his. And he hadn't touched those accounts in months. Not since a new senior manager in finance, Grant Keller, had borrowed his login during a system crash. Armand had forgotten all about it. Now he couldn't sleep. When the company's systems were quietly frozen for a shadow audit 2 days later, rumors started flying. Grant Keller didn't show up for work. His assistant cleared out his desk that evening. But no one had any answers. Everything was hush-hush. Leona knew none of this. She was busy updating her resume again, adding more unpaid internship work, trying to reword her skills to sound more corporate, and applying to smaller firms. It felt pointless, until she got a call from an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Mendez?" A crisp female voice said. "This is Vanessa Kerr from Delton Tech. I was hoping you had a moment to talk." Leona's breath caught. She sat up straighter. "Yes, of course." "I came across a report you authored," Vanessa said. "It's exceptional. Frankly, it may have saved this company from a significant legal and financial disaster." "I wasn't sure if anyone would actually read it," Leona admitted. Vanessa's tone softened just slightly. "Well, I did, and so did Mr. Mercer." Leona blinked. "The founder?" "He's requested a meeting with you, personally." I'm not an employee," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to break any—" "You didn't," Vanessa interrupted. "You flagged a breach, one that internal systems failed to catch. Mr. Mercer is grateful. Very grateful." Leona was silent for a beat. "Can I ask something?" she said finally. "Will my father get in trouble for how it got there?" Vanessa didn't answer right away. "No," she said at last. "In fact, I'd say he just got you an opportunity most people would dream of." They scheduled a meeting for the following Monday. Leona didn't tell her father until Sunday night. He stared at her, slack-jawed, as she recounted the call. "You're telling me the head of the whole company, Joel Mercer, wants to meet with you?" She nodded. He leaned back in his chair. I used to clean his office. He always said hello." "You think he remembers you?" "Probably not," he said. "But he's not the kind of man who wastes time. If he's calling you in, he means business." She had nothing to wear. Her father offered to pawn his old watch to help her buy something. She refused. Instead, she dug through her closet, found the one neutral-toned blouse that wasn't frayed, and ironed it 3 times. When she arrived at the building Monday morning, the receptionist, who had once barely looked at her, now stood up. "Miss Mendez," she said with a polite smile. "Mr. Mercer is expecting you. Please, right this way." The same elevator that had once carried her away in silence now lifted her toward something she hadn't dared imagine. A second chance. She stepped into a conference room, and there he was. Joel Mercer. Late 60s, silver hair, eyes that missed nothing. He didn't smile, but he did offer a firm handshake. "I've read your work," he said simply. "Twice." "Thank you, sir," she said. "You found what a dozen of our systems failed to catch. That takes more than intelligence. It takes instinct." She didn't know how to respond. "So," he continued, "here's my offer. We're creating a new internal role, compliance and systems risk analyst. You'll work directly with Vanessa. You'll be trained, paid fairly, and given the chance to prove what you can do. No favoritism, no shortcuts. You'll have to earn everything. Leona's chest tightened. And if I don't? Then you walk away, he said. But I don't think you will. She looked down at her hands, then back up. I accept. Joel nodded once. Good. Vanessa will handle the paperwork. As she turned to leave, he added, One more thing. She paused. That folder? The one your father left on my desk? Yes? I framed the cover page. She blinked. Why? Because it reminded me what this company used to stand for, he said. Hard work, truth, and the people who see what others miss. She left the building in a daze. Her father was waiting outside again, this time not on a mop bucket, but leaning on the hood of his old truck. Well, he asked. I start next week, she said. He didn't say anything at first. Then he smiled. Told you, right place would come. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. Because someone else had found out about the report. Someone who stood to lose everything. And they weren't about to let Leona stay in that company without a fight. The message came as a warning, not a threat. 3 days into her new role, Leona opened her company email and saw a single-line message from a blocked sender. You don't know what you're walking into. Stay out of it. She stared at the screen, heart thumping. No subject line, no signature, no attachments. Just a digital ghost telling her to back off. She didn't reply. Instead, she quietly forwarded the message to Vanessa Kerr. Within 10 minutes, Vanessa was at her desk. Did you click anything? She asked. No, Leona said. Just opened the email. Vanessa took a photo of the screen and nodded. Good. Don't delete it. I'll have our security team trace the IP. Should I be worried? Vanessa gave a tight smile. Not yet. But be careful who you trust. The mess you helped uncover goes deeper than we thought. Leona nodded slowly. How deep are we talking? Vanessa hesitated. Deep enough that Keller wasn't the only one manipulating the numbers. He was just the most careless. Later that day, Leona was pulled into her first major team meeting. A quiet, internal war room session. The audit had already found evidence of falsified vendor contracts going back over 2 years. Money had been siphoned out in small, deliberate increments, always buried under vague service codes or nondescript budget lines. And the deeper the audit went, the more it became clear. Someone very high up had signed off on most of it. But no one wanted to say the name out loud yet. Everyone had suspicions. But proof. That was harder. Leona spent the next several days combing through internal data with a small team handpicked by Vanessa. She wasn't treated like an outsider anymore. In fact, half the team seemed to defer to her, even though she had the least formal experience, because she noticed patterns they missed. She saw the gaps in invoices, the timing of transfers, the mirrored formatting in forged approvals. Her mind didn't just analyze, she absorbed. Vanessa once called her a heat-seeking missile for nonsense. But it wasn't just instinct. Leona had learned how to spot red flags long before this job, when her father struggled with rent payments, when loan officers offered help that wasn't help, when landlords changed contracts last minute. She'd grown up watching the language of exploitation, and now she was using that knowledge to crack open a scandal. And then it happened. She found the name. Melinda Brower, Senior Vice President of Strategic Finance. She had signed every approval, quietly, neatly. Every time money moved in the wrong direction, her initials were buried in metadata, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. Vanessa called an emergency closed-door session that evening. She's protected, the head of legal warned. Longtime board ally, friends with Mercer from the early years. Vanessa looked at Leona. Do we have enough? Not yet, Leona said, but we're close. The decision was made to keep digging, but to stay silent, for now. Leona didn't go home that night. She stayed in the building, reviewing files, chasing leads. At 2:47 a.m., she found the link that tied it all together. A shell company registered under a fake address, one used repeatedly for consulting fees. Only it had no staff, no phone number, no real activity. But the bank account it was linked to, shared with a boutique art firm in upstate New York. And that art firm? Melinda's sister owned it. The money trail was now visible. The next morning, as Leona prepared her final findings, she received another message. This time it wasn't an email. It was a hand-delivered envelope slid under her office door. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You're in over your head. Walk away or you'll regret it." No name, no return address. But the handwriting wasn't anonymous. Leona recognized it, from interview notes, from old expense reports, from one of the many forms she'd reviewed during her late-night digging. It was Melinda's. Vanessa wasn't surprised. "She's panicking," she said. "That's good. Desperate people make sloppy moves." Leona's jaw tightened. "She threatened me. Indirectly. That's all she can afford to do right now. But I'm doubling your security clearance. From now on, don't walk to your car alone. And if anything feels off, you call me immediately." Word of the internal audit was still tightly contained, but rumors had started to spread. People noticed who was staying late, who was suddenly too quiet, who was avoiding eye contact. Melinda, for her part, played it cool, smiling in meetings, sending team-wide memos. She even congratulated Leona publicly for her recent contributions to operational transparency. But behind closed doors, she was spiraling. By Friday, the board was brought in. Joel Mercer returned to the office unannounced. His face gave nothing away. He met privately with Vanessa, legal, and one other board advisor. Leona wasn't in that room, but she was called in 30 minutes later. "Miss Mendez," Joel said, seated at the head of the table, "would you walk us through your findings?" She did, calmly, clearly, backed by files, timestamps, financial reports, and confirmation from independent auditors. No one interrupted her. Not once. When she finished, Joel asked a single question. "Are you absolutely sure?" Leona looked him in the eye. "Yes, sir, I am." He turned to his legal counsel. "Begin proceedings, quietly." Later that day, Melinda was asked to take an indefinite leave pending investigation. She didn't argue, but the look she gave Leona as she passed her in the hallway wasn't one of defeat. It was a warning. That afternoon, Joel Mercer took Leona aside. "You've done something most seasoned professionals wouldn't dare," he said. "You exposed rot in a system designed to hide it." "I just followed the trail," she said. "Don't minimize it. You could have walked away after the interview. Most would have. Instead, you changed this company." Leona didn't know what to say. "I'm assigning you a mentor," Joel said. "You're moving departments, upstairs. Your title will change. Your salary will change. But your job remains the same. Keep us honest." She swallowed. "Thank you." He nodded once. "One more thing." "Yes?" "I want you to present the full report to the board. Yourself. I think they should see exactly what happens when a company listens to the right voices, no matter where they come from." Leona felt her stomach turn, but in the best way. Not fear. Purpose. As she prepared for the presentation over the weekend, she got a text from her father. "Proud of you doesn't even begin to cover it." She stared at it for a long time. And then, just before midnight, another message arrived. This one wasn't from her father. It was from an unknown number again. You may have won the first round, but don't think this is over. Leona didn't respond to the message, not out of fear, but because she knew that whoever sent it was already losing ground. Their threat, hidden behind an untraceable number, was a last gasp, an attempt to rattle her. It didn't. By Monday morning, the boardroom was filled. 11 seats occupied by executives and shareholders, including Joel Mercer at the head. Not one of them had expected a junior hire, let alone the daughter of a janitor, to walk in holding the report that would change the company's future. Vanessa gave a short introduction. Then Leona stood. She didn't try to impress them with technical jargon or fancy words. She didn't perform. She explained how the misappropriated funds were hidden, how the fake vendor was traced, how Melinda Brower had exploited blind spots in the reporting system for nearly 2 years, possibly longer. Every detail backed by documentation. At the end, she added quietly, "This isn't just about one person. It's about a culture that trusted titles more than truth, systems more than questions, and people who didn't look like they belonged, like me, were never expected to notice anything." A silence followed. Then Mercer stood. "Thank you, Miss Mendez." The board voted unanimously to begin legal proceedings against Melinda. Termination, asset review, and cooperation with external investigators. Several heads turned in surprise. This wasn't just suspension. It was scorched earth. By Wednesday, Melinda was gone. Her office cleared, nameplate removed. News of the scandal was managed internally, but word inevitably leaked to industry insiders. An exposé followed in a well-known business blog. From janitor's closet to boardroom, how one young woman saved Delton Tech. Leona's name was everywhere, but she hadn't spoken to any reporters. She avoided the spotlight. She still rode the same bus, still packed her lunch, still called her father every night. But everything around her had changed. Her new title, Senior Risk and Ethics Analyst. She had an office with a view now. Her badge granted her access to nearly every floor. She'd been invited to join the Internal Advisory Committee on Transparency. And, more quietly, Mercer had listed her as one of 5 advisors on an ethics reform bill he was personally sponsoring in the company's name. But none of it went to her head. She remembered where she started, and she remembered what it had taken to get here. Months passed. Delton Tech stabilized, stock recovered, leadership shifted. One evening, while leaving the office, she ran into Armand Soto, the junior analyst whose credentials had been used by Keller. He looked sheepish. "I never thanked you," he said, "for proving I wasn't part of it." Leona smiled. "You didn't have to. I just followed the trail." He grinned. "Still, that trail could have ruined my life." "Glad it didn't," she said. Before they parted, he hesitated. "You ever think about starting something of your own?" She raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "A consultancy, independent ethics investigations. A lot of companies need someone like you." She laughed. "I just got here." "Yeah," he said, "but people like you don't stay here for long." She didn't answer, but the idea lingered. The next week she received a letter, handwritten, no sender name on the envelope. Inside, a single line. "You were supposed to quit. You still can. Walk away now. No return address, no traceable postmark." But this time she didn't feel threatened. She felt challenged. So she filed the letter, quietly, into a folder marked Persistent Pressure Incidents, Non-Escalated. It joined the earlier note and the email. Vanessa saw the folder on Leona's desk later that day. "You're still tracking them?" Leona nodded. Yes, if they're going to keep sending threats, I may as well turn them into case studies. Vanessa smiled. You're becoming a real professional. I learned from the best. More time passed. Then, one morning, Joel Mercer called her into his office. I'm stepping down, he said simply. This time for good. She blinked. You are? Sold my remaining shares. I'll announce it next quarter. Wanted you to hear it from me. Who's replacing you? He paused. That's the thing. The board will vote on a few candidates, but they've asked me to recommend someone new to the inner circle. A younger voice. One that sees what others miss. Her eyes widened slightly. He leaned forward. They need someone who remembers where she came from, who isn't dazzled by numbers or titles, someone who doesn't blink at power, but questions it. I'm not, she started. You are, he cut in. You've already proven it. I'm 24, she said. I started this company when I was 26. Leona said nothing. She didn't need to. A week later, her name was added as the youngest strategic advisor to the Delton Tech Executive Committee. She didn't tell many people. But her father? He knew. He framed the announcement article and hung it in their modest hallway, right next to her high school diploma, and when people asked about it, he'd smile and say, That's my daughter. Rejected at her first interview, saved the company on her second try. But the story didn't end there. Because now, Leona wasn't just solving problems. She was building systems to prevent them. She was mentoring interns who had once been overlooked like her. She was rewriting policy, restructuring departments, and quietly, she began laying the foundation for something bigger. Her own firm. One built on transparency, logic, and accountability. Because she knew now what power looked like and how it was misused. And she had no intention of staying quiet again. Not ever.